Wanted, a man known to frequent saloons and gamble on horse races, last seen wearing a black Stetson hat with a purple plume, riding a palomino. Any information leading to his capture will be rewarded. Welcome back, partner, to the Legend of the Week. I'm your host, and today we're going to talk about a man who went down in history for his dastardly deeds. But was he really that bad? Was he just misunderstood? Let's find out. John Winston Ringo was born on June 6, 1849, in the heart of Ohio. He grew up on a farm where his family moved when he was still just a babe. His father, John Baptist Ringo, was a veteran of the Black Hawk War and the Mexican War. So when Johnny was old enough, he learned how to shoot and ride from his PA. By age 16, he could handle any gun and was a crack shot with the bow and arrow. That same year, 1865, he joined the Union Army and fought for the North during the Civil War until it ended. After the war, like so many other men, he was left feeling lost and without purpose. In 1867, he married his sweetheart, Josephine Bass, and tried his hand at farming in Indiana. But his mind wasn't in it, and neither were his skills. He struggled with crops and livestock. And after a couple years, he headed west. He traveled to Denver and then on to Leadville, Colorado, where he tried his luck mining for silver. This lasted for a bit, but eventually he packed it in and started working as a stagecoach driver. One day, while driving the coach, he came across an Indian agent named George Bent, who would become a close friend and mentor of young Johnny. George taught him how to track animals and survive off the land, and together they spent a lot of time hunting, trapping, and fishing. But in 1876, George had to return to his post, and so Johnny continued on his way, traveling all around the country. He found work wherever he could, working as a ranch hand and anything else to keep him busy, but soon his old army buddies started writing to him and inviting him to join them on cattle drives and to fight wild horses for the U.S. cavalry. So that's what he did. He rounded up wild Mustangs for the Army and herded cattle from Texas to Montana. But his favorite thing to do by far was race horses. He saved up his money and bought a racehorse named Little America, which he raced all over the western states. But as his reputation grew, so did his arrogance. And one night after drinking heavily, he got into a fight with another cowboy, supposedly killing him over a game of dominoes. This caused him to leave town before sunrise, never looking back. Around this time, he started going by the name of Johnny Ringo, and he traveled on foot or on horseback, sometimes riding a palomino horse with a purple plume sticking out of its hat. Yes, you heard me right. A palomino with a purple plume. I don't know why he chose purple either, but there it is. He worked for various ranches in the West, including one owned by Ike and Cora Logan. They lived near Charleston, Arizona, and they became like surrogate parents to Johnny. They even helped him get his gambling debts cleared. But he still couldn't stay out of the saloons, and after losing a large sum of money, he rode away from the ranch in the middle of the night. The Logans weren't too surprised when Johnny left because they knew he was a drifter and never meant to stay put for long. But others didn't seem to understand this. Rumors started spreading about Johnny and his deeds. And as he traveled from town to town, these stories only grew. People claimed he was a murderer, a horse thief, a train robber, and everything else in between. It got so bad that sheriffs and posses would go out looking for him, wanting to hang him for crimes he may or may not have committed. Now, I want you to remember, this was long before the days of the internet and social media. There were no Facebook pages or YouTube channels. If you wanted to spread the word about a dangerous outlaw, your only option was word of mouth. And boy, did people talk. Johnny would hear the rumors and laugh himself silly, thinking it was all just tall tale. But then he met a man named Joe Book, and one night while sitting around a fire, he said to Johnny, "You've got a mighty big reputation, Mr. Ringo, and most of it's bad." Johnny just smiled and said, "I don't rightly know what you're talking about." Book replied, "They say you killed 2 men in Kansas over a game of dominoes." Johnny laughed and said, "That's a good one." Book stood up and said, "Then I'll believe it when I see it." And with that, he walked away. Johnny looked at the fire and said to himself, "Well, now I guess I gotta kill 2 men in Kansas." He then got up and walked away. And let's just say that from that point on, the legend of Johnny Ringo grew and grew and grew. One day, Sheriff Joe Book kept his eyes peeled for Johnny, spotting him in the saloon and immediately drawing his gun. Johnny saw it coming and pulled out his own iron, and the 2 men stared each other down. Nobody moved. Then Johnny holstered his gun and walked right past the sheriff. He tipped his hat and said, "Maybe another time, Sheriff," and walked out. Book didn't move until Johnny had passed through the swinging doors, and then he holstered his gun. And so the tales of his bravery only grew more and more. But what were the real facts behind this famous gunman? Well, he wasn't quite the saint that some people thought he was, but he wasn't the devil that others believed him to be. He had been arrested several times for things like horse theft and raping a woman, but those were just small towns trying to make a big name for themselves by linking their own little crime to such a famous outlaw. He had killed people, yes, but not nearly as many as the stories claimed. One source said that he killed 3 men, while another claims it was 5. But we don't know how accurate either of these are. What we do know is that he died on July 13, 1882, in Camp Vernon, Arizona. A bullet was fired into his head, and the only witness was a prostitute who quickly fled the scene. No one knows who killed him or why. Maybe it was someone who recognized him from a wanted poster. Maybe it was a man whose brother or father or son he'd killed in a drunken gunfight. Maybe it was the sheriff who finally got tired of his games. Or maybe it was a random occurrence, a stranger who had nothing against Johnny, but simply pulled the trigger for kicks. We don't know. All we do know is that when his body was discovered, it was placed in a coffin and buried in an unmarked grave. Years later, someone came along and erected a tombstone with the words, "Here lies Johnny Ringo, the man, the myth, the legend." Now, whether he was a man, a myth, or a legend, we don't know for sure. But we do know that he died a violent death, and that should be enough. So do you think Johnny Ringo was actually as bad as they say he was? Or do you think he was just a regular guy who happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time? Let us know in the comments below. And now, partner, it's time to wrap this here episode up. I've been your host today, and I want to thank you for joining me. Be sure to like this video if you liked it, and don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss any of our new episodes. Until next time, remember, the best way to a man's heart is through his stomach unless he's a cowboy. Then it's through his saddle.